Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 837, and today is September 15th, 2025. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. We got a good amount of news to get through on today's show, but first need to mention the sponsor of today's episode, and that is the Expat Money Summit 2025. This great annual online event is hosted by Mikhail Thorup, the host of the Expat Money Show. And best of all, you can get a ticket to this event for free just by going to the expatmoneysummit.com. Now, what the Expat Money Summit focuses on is helping you to craft your plan B. If you ever want to get out of the United States of America, if things get unstable here, the economy takes a downturn, you want to have some place where you and your family could go, can be safe and be prosperous. And Mikhail will help you, and all the great guests at the Expat Money Summit 2025 will help you put together a perfect plan B. Getting a second passport, where can you buy property abroad, what's the tax situation like, all those questions will be answered. Now, the Expat Money Summit also does some extra panels. A VIP ticket is available if you want access to all those panels. I will be appearing on one of those panels along with my antiwar.com colleague Dave DeCamp. And good news, you could get your VIP ticket 20% off when you use the promo code Kyle. That is KYLE when you check out. Very easy to remember, very easy to do. So get your ticket to the Expat Money Summit 2025 today at expatmoneysummit.com. Again, expatmoneysummit.com. Now, let's jump into the news today. Just want to remind people, of course, I do have a second show, The Kyle Anzalone Show, and today I will be interviewing the great Colonel Douglas Macgregor at 4:45 Eastern Time. You will not want to miss that interview, so be sure you're subscribed to that channel. It is the top link in the show notes page, so everybody can find it. And of course, I do a ton of writing all over the place. Antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute, JudgeNap.com, multiple shows. All my work can always be found on my Twitter handle, very easy to find, at KyleAnzalone_. All right, so starting off here today with the article I wrote for antiwar.com on September 12th. House passes defense spending bill that includes repeal of Iraq war authorizations. So the House of Representatives passed the annual Pentagon spending bill. The legislation includes the repeal of the authorization for use of military force for the Gulf and Iraq wars. The 2026 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, passed the House on Wednesday 231 to 196. The vote mainly fell upon party lines, with 17 Democrats voting for the legislation and 4 Republicans voting against. The NDAA is the annual Department of War funding bill. The House and Senate typically pass separate versions of the legislation. Then leadership of the upper and lower chambers meet in conference committee and roll out a compromise bill. Repealing the AUMFs may have support in the Senate. In 2024, the Senate passed legislation by a wide margin that repealed the 2002 and the 1991 AUMFs. The House version of the NDAA includes a provision that will repeal the 1991 and 2002 AUMFs. The laws are responsible for allowing the president to start the Gulf and Iraq wars. While the AUMFs are rarely invoked today to justify military action, during his first term, President Donald Trump asserted the 2002 AUMF gave him the authority to assassinate Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq in 2020. The 2001 AUMF, passed in the days after the 9/11 terror attack, is the authorization presidents have relied on to wage war across Africa and Asia. The provision repealing the AUMFs was inserted into the text of the bill during the amendment process in the House Rules Committee. The repeal was introduced by Democrat Jim McGovern and only passed with the support of 3 members of the House Freedom Caucus. The full House also voted on the AUMF amendment 261 to 167, with 49 Republicans joining most of the Democrats in supporting the change. A top Democrat said his party largely voted against the NDAA because they did not get any of the amendments they offered into the bill. So Adam Smith said, "We didn't get any of the amendments or debates that we wanted, not a single solitary one." And so I thought this was just an interesting statement explaining why the Democrats voted against the NDAA when they got what I see here as a fairly important amendment that they supported stuck into this bill. And it's because somebody like Adam Smith, who's a avowed warmonger, this isn't one the amendments that he supported. The Democrats had other things. Maybe some of them would have been good, some of them would have been bad, but that was disappointing. So the legislation also includes funding for the Department of War, U.S. nuclear program, and foreign aid. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene previously tried to amend the NDAA to remove $500 million in military aid for Israel. That amendment was rejected by the House 6-422. Next up, another piece of House legislation that I think is fairly important. This one is from antiwar.com on September 14th. I wrote it. House bill would give Secretary of State power to revoke U.S. passport for aiding terrorism. So this is Congressman Brian Mast, and he has introduced new legislation that will give the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the authority to revoke passports of U.S. citizens for aiding terrorism. Civil liberties organizations are alarmed that the bill could lead to government thought policing. A provision tucked away in H.R. 300 is a provision that will allow the Secretary of State to revoke the passports of Americans who are determined by the Secretary to be aiding terrorism. So this is the text of the bill. The Secretary of State shall refuse to issue passports to any individual who the Secretary determines has knowingly aided, assisted, abetted, or otherwise provided material support to an organization the Secretary has designated as a foreign terrorist organization. Seth Stern, the director of advocacy at the Freedom of Press Foundation, told The Intercept, Marco Rubio has claimed the power to designate people as terrorist supporters based solely on what they think and say, even if what they say doesn't include a word about terrorist organization or terrorism. He went on to say the bill could allow for thought policing at the hands of one individual. Since becoming Secretary of State, Marco Rubio has used his power to attempt to expel multiple people in America legally who engaged in pro-Palestinian speech and activism. One graduate student was detained for writing an op-ed in his school newspaper. Mast, who once wore an Israeli military uniform in the Capitol, has called for expelling terrorist sympathizers from the country. Republicans frequently conflate support for Palestinians or opposition to sending military aid to Israel as pro-terroristic rhetoric. The House is taking additional steps to punish people for holding a pro-Palestinian position. The massive military funding bill, the NDAA, that passed the House last week, includes a ban on Pentagon contractors for participating in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which is a movement that is advocating for ending investment or divesting from Israel because of the horrors that Israel is inflicting on the Palestinians. All right, next up here, moving on to the war in Ukraine, but sticking with the Congress, a bipartisan group of senators to ramp up economic war on Russia. So a bipartisan group of senators is introducing a new bill that will place Russia and Belarus on the state-sponsored terrorism list. Senator Lindsey Graham is also lobbying the president to support legislation that will put a 500% tariff on Russia and India for trading with Russia. Graham is joined by Senators Richard Blumenthal, Amy Klobuchar, and Katie Britt, who all announced the legislation to add Russia and Belarus to the state-sponsored terrorism list on Thursday. The senators claim that Russia has kidnapped 19,000 Ukrainian children. Graham said, "It's hard to get on that list. Well, let me tell you, Russia earned the right to be on that list. We're going to create another front against Putin's Russia. The Russians have invaded Ukraine and they have kidnapped, we think, 19,546 Ukrainian children away from their families in Ukraine. Moscow says the children were relocated from orphanages in Ukrainian war zones for their safety." And so I think a lot of these kids actually do come from ethnic Russian households. It's not as if They are Ukrainians. They're from the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia, where Russia controls territory. Their parents either killed by the war or they were already orphans. And so Russia said, well, we have to take them out of the war zone and we got to move them somewhere safe, which is inside of Russia. And they have like these boarding school type facilities for the children. So additionally, Graham is pushing the White House to support a bill in Congress that will place massive tariffs on Russia's trading partners. Before the congressional summer recess, President Donald Trump had not given his green light for the Senate to take up the issue. However, Trump has recently expressed that India and Russia are now in a bloc led by China and placed a 50% tariff on New Delhi. Graham said he spoke with the White House about the bill and believes he made progress in gaining Trump's support. If the president gives his support for the legislation, it will likely quickly pass the Senate, as the bill has racked up 80 co-sponsors, which is just an unheard of number. All right, next up here is an article that I wrote for antiwar.com on September 14th. Ukrainian drone causes fire at major Russian refinery. So a Ukrainian drone attack hit a major Russian oil refinery and railways. The escalating drone warfare between Moscow and Kiev has resulted in more Russian UAVs in the airspace of NATO countries. Ukrainian forces attacked the Kershi oil refinery in Russia's Leningrad Oblast. Kershi is one of Russia's largest refineries and about 500 miles from the Ukrainian border. The governor of the Leningrad region said three drones were intercepted, with one causing a fire at the refinery that was extinguished. Ukraine launched at least 80 drones at Russia on Sunday. Kiev also claimed to conduct sabotage attacks inside Russia that destroyed railways that helped Moscow deliver supplies to its soldiers in Ukraine. Moscow did not report any injuries in the attack on the refinery, and Kiev reported killing 2 Russian soldiers in the sabotage attack on the railways. The drone war between Kiev and Moscow has continued to ratchet up as Russia has targeted military industrial buildings near Ukraine's border. An increasing number of drones have entered Polish and Romanian airspace. Last week, 24 Russian drones entered Polish airspace. A small number of drones were shot down by NATO fighter jets. Some of the recovered UAVs were decoy models and did not carry explosives. European leaders have called the drones an intentional provocation, while Russia says the drones were targeting military sites in Ukraine and only flew off course due to electronic warfare. On Saturday, a Russian drone flew over Romania before turning around and bombing Ukraine. The Romanian defense minister said his country did not down the UAV because it turned around. The drone incursions have caused a divide between the U.S. and Europe. Reuters reports that European leaders are unhappy that President Donald Trump has not responded more forcefully to the Russian drone incursion. A German official told the outlet, "With the U.S. administration, we can't rely on anything, but we pretend that we could." And so I do think, this is one of the major stories that has been covered up in the news cycle by the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the Israeli attempted assassination of Hamas leadership in Qatar. But I think it's a highly important story, and I think the European countries are really going to try to use this to get Donald Trump to significantly escalate the Western support for Ukraine. And I think their main goal is going to be to get the U.S. to either be involved in or at least approve of NATO shooting down Russian missiles in Ukraine that are anywhere near the border regions with NATO countries. All right, so next up here, let's do this one that I wrote for JudgeNap.com last week. NATO used F-35s and $450 missiles to down Russian decoy drones in Poland. So, this, again, article, JudgeNap.com, September 14th. So I write, the North Atlantic Alliance used some of its most advanced military equipment to shoot down a small number of Russian drones that crossed into Polish airspace from Ukraine. A NATO official said using fighter jets to down Russian drones is not sustainable. The German outlet Bild reports that NATO used Sidewinder missiles fired from F-35s to down 2 or 3 Russian drones that entered Polish airspace. On Wednesday, about 24 Russian drones flew into Polish airspace. A European Union official claimed Moscow directed the drones at Poland as a deliberate provocation. NATO scrambled aircraft and air defenses from the Netherlands, Italy, Poland, and Germany in response to the incursion. The F-35 fired Sidewinder missiles and drones. Sidewinders cost about $450,000 each. The NATO aircraft only managed to shoot down 2 or 3 of the Russian UAVs. A senior NATO official told Bild, in the long run, it makes no military sense to use F-35s against drones. And in response, Germany is going to ramp up its military support for Poland inside of Polish territory. All right, next article that we have here today is one that I wrote for the Libertarian Institute. Germany to add more than 100,000 troops to army in preparation for war with Russia. I wrote this one for the Institute last week. In the article, I explained that the German defense minister is looking to significantly ramp up the size of Berlin's armed forces. This includes adding 100,000 new troops to the military. It's imperative for the army to become sufficiently ready for war by 2019 and provide the capabilities Germany pledged to NATO by 2035, and that was a statement from the army chief in Berlin. The proposal comes as Berlin is increasing its defense commitments to Eastern European nations. Germany is in the process of establishing a permanent deployment of 5,000 troops in Lithuania. Additionally, Berlin is planning to increase its surveillance of Poland after 24 Russian drones entered Polish airspace. Berlin is yet to reach its goal that was set in 2018 of having 203,000 troops across its military, and now the current goal is to have 260,000 active duty soldiers with another 200,000 reservists. So this doesn't necessarily seem possible or likely. All right, This article, moving on now to Israel. Netanyahu signs off on major West Bank settlement expansion, says there will be no Palestinian state. This one from our friend Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com on September 11th. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday signed off on a major expansion of illegal Jewish settlements in the Israeli-occupied West Bank and vowed there would never be a Palestinian state. So Netanyahu said at the signing ceremony, "We are going to fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us." The agreement Netanyahu signed authorizes the construction of the controversial E1 settlement plan, which was put on ice for decades due to international opposition. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, a West Bank settler himself, recently announced that Israel will push through the project to bury the idea of a Palestinian state. At the signing ceremony, Smotrich said Israel would soon be celebrating the annexation of the West Bank. The Prime Minister told me, "I'm staying here to hear what you have to say, and I know what you intend to say. Mr. Prime Minister, all of us soon will thank you and congratulate you for celebrating together the application of sovereignty throughout Judea and Samaria." And those are the terms that Israel uses for the West Bank because they plan to steal it and make it Israeli territory and expel the Palestinians. All right, so after this happens, Netanyahu meets with Rubio. U.S.-Israeli relations as durable as the Western Wall. This one I wrote for antiwar.com on September 14th. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is traveling to Israel to reaffirm the special relationship between Washington and Tel Aviv. President Donald Trump was reported to be frustrated with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after he attempted to assassinate several Hamas officials in Qatar. So shortly after arriving in Israel on Sunday, Rubio made a visit to the Western Wall. He said, this was what Netanyahu said when he was at the Western Wall with Rubio. "I think his visit here is a testament to the durability, the strength of the Israeli-American alliance. It's as strong, as durable as the stones in the Western Wall that he just touched. Under President Donald Trump and Secretary Rubio and their entire team, this alliance has never been stronger. And so I feel like Netanyahu, in a sense, is really throwing it in Rubio's face that, we were able to attempt an assassination strike in a U.S. allied country, and it has no impact on the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Unbelievable. So the State Department said the purpose of the trip was for Rubio to convey America's priority in the Israel-Hamas conflict and broader security concerns in the Middle East security, and reaffirming U.S. commitment to Israeli security. He will also emphasize our shared goals, ensuring Hamas never rules over Gaza again and bringing all the hostages home. Rubio's travel to Tel Aviv follows Israel's attempt to assassinate Hamas leadership in Qatar. Israel fired about a dozen missiles at Hamas building in Doha, killing at least 6 people. However, the Hamas leadership survived the attack. The strike occurred as top members of the Palestinian group were meeting to discuss the ceasefire and hostage exchange that was proposed by President Donald Trump. The Qatari Prime Minister said Netanyahu killed any hope of Hamas releasing the remaining living Israeli hostages with the assassination attempt. Qatar is a major non-NATO U.S. ally and has strongly condemned the attack. Trump is reported to be frustrated with Netanyahu over the assassination attempt. A source close to the White House told Politico, every time they're making progress, it seems like he bombed someone. That's why the president and his aides are frustrated with Netanyahu. And this has happened multiple times. And while there's reports that the White House is increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu, there doesn't seem to be any real desire to do anything about it. All right, one of the bigger stories I have for y'all today is this one I wrote for the Institute, or for antiwar.com on September 14th. 300,000 Palestinians forced to flee as Israeli strikes pound Gaza City. Israel has ramped up its military operations in Gaza City, destroying dozens of buildings that Tel Aviv claims are used by Hamas. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been forced from the city to the Al-Mawasi area. On Sunday, the IDF said it estimated that 300,000 Palestinians have left Gaza City since the Israeli military operations began last month. About 1 million Palestinians were sheltering in the city. Tel Aviv has ordered the entire population of Gaza City to evacuate to the Mawasi safe zone. Palestinian sources estimate fewer people have left Gaza City, reporting 900,000 people are still living in the region. However, the Palestine Civil Defense says the pace is increasing, with 6,000 people fleeing on Saturday. On Sunday, videos and images were published showing thousands of people attempting to flee the bombing. Some Palestinians say they are unable to leave Gaza City because they cannot afford the transportation out of the city and a spot in Mawasi. So over the past day, Israeli bombs have destroyed homes, high-rises, shelters, and medical facilities. The Gaza Health Ministry reported 32 Palestinians were killed during the bombardment on Sunday. The displaced Palestinians are being forced into the Mawasi region, which Israel has dubbed a safe zone. Palestinians question whether they will be safe in Mawasi, as the IDF have bombed the displacement camp several times. So a journalist told Al Jazeera, it's called a safe zone, but we have been living here for months and we know that it's not safe. How can I call it safe when Israel killed and bombed my own sister within this safe zone? Additionally, conditions in the city are deplorable. One Palestinian man said, not only are missiles pouring down on our heads, but famine is devouring us too. And so it's absolutely sick what Israel is doing by forcing all these Palestinians into Mawasi, where there's no infrastructure, there's not a sufficient amount of food. It is essentially just throwing these Palestinians in a humanitarian death camp, right? Like, that they call it humanitarian safe zone or humanitarian area, but really it's just a death camp. It's a place they're going to wait to die. They're going to have to make the daily journey to the GHF sites to try to get some food, where they'll be gunned down by Israeli soldiers. It's really an awful and sad situation. Want to mention this report: Trump may meet with Syria's Al-Qaeda leader turned president in New York this month. And so Ahmed al-Shara, or Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, the former leader, the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, tied to and was involved with the Islamic State at one point, is about to be welcomed into New York City by President Donald Trump for an administration that is paranoid about terrorism and deporting Americans for supporting terror, or not deporting Americans, deporting people in America here legally for supporting Palestinians and calling them terrorists. The idea that maybe we're going to have the Secretary of State Rubio revoking our passports for supporting Palestine, claiming that it's terrorism, is something on the administration list, but they're also embracing Abu Mohammed al-Jolani. Absolutely disgusting. Another article I wrote here, this one for JudgeNap.com on September 11th, U.S. places new sanctions on Houthi network. So there's some entities in China and the UAE that were sanctioned by the U.S., claiming that these companies have ties, or these individuals have ties to Ansar Allah or the Houthis. That seems fictitious to me. I'll be honest, I don't always believe when the government says these people need to be sanctioned, but the sanctions are happening anyways. All right, this is a big story. I wrote this one for antiwar.com on September 12th. Israeli strikes on media office kill at least 25 journalists in Yemen. The number since I wrote this article has increased to 30. So an Israeli attack in Yemen hit the offices of 2 newspapers in Sana'a, killing dozens of journalists and civilians. The Yemeni Journalists Union condemned the attack, labeling it a heinous war crime. So an Israeli according to the Yemeni Health Ministry, the Israeli strikes at the offices of the 26th September newspaper and the Al Yemen newspaper, killing 25 journalists. September 26th, the military's media outlet. So, we have Stars and Stripes here in the U.S. If Russia or China were to bomb that, obvious war crime, same thing here. And Al Yemen is one of the most read newspapers in the country. Interesting, Al Yemen is one of the most read newspapers, not only in Yemen, but also in the part of Yemen that isn't controlled by Ansar Allah, isn't controlled by the Houthis. And so for it to be one of the most widely read newspapers in the South would suggest it's not like just a Houthi propaganda rag. It's not just putting out, government talking points and propaganda. It's really a newspaper that is covering the daily events in Yemen and is widely read across the country. Again, even outside of Houthi or Ansar Allah controlled territory. So I think that makes it even worse. The Yemeni Journalists Union said it strongly condemns the heinous war crimes committed by the brutal Israeli aggression on Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, through its direct targeting of the offices of 26th September newspaper and the Al Yemen newspaper in the capital. Yemeni authorities report that at least 46 people were killed in strikes across the Nile on Thursday. A military facility and a fuel station were targeted, along with the media offices. The death toll is expected to rise, and recovery efforts are ongoing. More than 165 people were injured. The majority of those killed, 38, were killed in the strikes which targeted residential areas. The latest Israeli airstrikes in Yemen are part of the ongoing conflict between Tel Aviv and Ansar Allah. Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, control most of Yemen, including the capital city. After Israel began its onslaught and siege of Gaza, Ansar Allah placed a blockade of Israeli-lane shipping in the Black Sea. In the Red Sea, not the Black Sea, that would be much further away. In response to the blockade, Israel and the U.S. have repeatedly bombed Yemen, killing a large number of civilians. The strikes have failed to break the blockade, and Ansar Allah has responded by direct attacks on Israel with missiles and drones. The blockade has caused significant financial losses to Israel's Red Sea port. In July, the head of the Israeli Red Sea port said that the facility may have to shut down without additional financial assistance from Tel Aviv. Yemeni leaders opposed to Ansar Allah, so again, this is the opposition government that's backed by the U.S., our allies in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, warned U.S. senators that the strikes in Yemen have only empowered the Houthis. The warning was sent following an Israeli attack that killed political leaders, including the Prime Minister of Yemen. So, surprise, surprise, if you bomb a country a bunch of times, kill civilians, kill journalists, kill the Prime Minister, the people of that country don't hate the government, they hate you. All right, last article here today. U.S. bombs Somalia for 75th time this year. This one from our pal Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Doing the coverage that so few people in America are doing. The U.S. is carrying out a major bombing campaign in Somalia under the Trump administration. Almost no coverage. They always claim they're getting ISIS and Al-Shabaab. I don't know. I doubt it. I really doubt it. All right, that'll do it for the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, Colonel Douglas McGregor on the Kyle Anzalone show at 4:45 today. You won't want to miss it. Tune in and check it out.